and welcome to the final installment of the information about shadow. One thing that is important to mention is, although this series has ended, our work with shadow continues the rest of our lives. It's just not something that you can look at once, excuse me, and move out of completely. You'll always be tempted to come back to shadow. You'll always be tempted to look away from that which is difficult to look at. One of the most important things to look at, though, is yourself and your behavior and what your motivations were. Recently, I had a situation where my motivation was only to have fun, but the result of having fun, unfortunately, hurt people. So uh, I'm just being truthful here in my talk, and I want you to know that we all make mistakes, and we all have to learn from them in order to grow. I think the hardest thing for me is, as a woman of 66 and growing up in the 70s and the 80s, um, humor was very different than it used to be. And, everything is very um, appropriate. One must be very appropriate in all situations. Unfortunately, sometimes I slip back into that 19, 20-year-old girl, and I'm not appropriate. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I'd like to talk about the Mandorla. Everybody knows what a mandala is. If you've seen them, they're around. Representation inside of them is what the entire world is. It's a holy circle that represents wholeness in the world and in our life, in the universe. The Mandorla also has a healing effect, and the Mandorla is a little bit different, but I think that the best way to explain it is as an almond shape around usually an icon such as Mother Mary and other religious, if you're in that. I'm sure all of you have seen also the fish symbol for Christianity. That's sort of a mandorla as well, because it's almond shaped, even though it's sideways. And we can see where the two parts come together. And that's what we're dealing with here. The mandorla is it's an overlapping circle, and in the middle of this circle is what the Mandorla is. Some of you may understand what a Venn diagram is, and when you're looking at a Venn diagram, you're putting together something. You tend to want to put, this, and then the gray area is in the middle, and that's where you put your information. So I guess if you are familiar with Venn diagrams, I am going to attach two websites that you can go to look for more information on this, to see what it looks like and get a better, bigger picture, because it's a little hard to describe. It's circles that overlap, and they're always, or most of the time, opposites, and parts of heaven and parts of hell. And when I use the word hell, I use it metaphorically, and even heaven is metaphoric. I don't believe that there is one or the other. I believe there is an integration of the two. We need to examine shadow and take these banished elements, the elements we don't want to look at, because they can't be exiled forever. They're going to come out in all different types of ways. So it's very, very important for you to recognize that. The symbol has a healing function because it helps us transfer cultural and spiritual lives, and it does not end our cultural life at all, because we live here. We live in this world, and so we can't just say, well, I'm getting out of this world, unless we're going to leave for good. This begins the healing split that we have, and it starts a really slow overlap, and then it broadens itself out as it goes, as you sort of making your discoveries. That's what that would be. Think of the sliver of the moon during the moon, the different phases of the moon and a sliver, but the rest of it's there. And you've got, it's going to broaden itself out at some point. As time passes, the greater the overlap, the more complete your healing is. And remember, it may have to be done more than once. It's very important for you to note that. There is no complete in anything that we have in life, including learning our lessons. The Mandorla binds together that which has been torn apart and made unwhole, unholy. The unwhole is unholy, so we have to bring that back into us. The other thing I could suggest to you is it is a place of poetry. If you've ever read a poem, and I have students tell me all the time, I hate poetry, I don't understand it, I don't want to read it, I don't get it, what does it mean? It doesn't make sense, all of those things. Poetry takes some very big thing and brings it down to a very small description, usually. And the language of poetry is metaphoric. And we live in a metaphoric world where we say this is that, and that is this, and so on. And poets take fragmented and make unity out of it. So think of it that way. Language is very much a Mandorla. And this is Mandorla. I'm sorry, Mandorla. The to be verbs define us. They unify our identity and they honor others. We say, I am she, or I am he. We don't say, I am him, or I am her. It's I am she, I am he. It is I. We are all poets and healers when we use language correctly. Right now, if you'll notice, a lot of people don't even use language correctly. They don't know how to use it. They didn't learn the right way to say things. And I don't mean politically correct or not. What I mean is bringing together sentences, bringing together phrases, and being able to make sense of the correct way to say them. Out of we can talk our way out of our dilemma like a cure, and is very reliable to those in doing so. It's important for us sometimes to just sit down and talk, use language to work through a situation. We may speak to another person, or we may even speak to ourselves. Some people write it, but some people say, okay, what have I got to do next? How am I going to get out of this situation? How am I going to handle this situation? We talk ourselves through those steps in what we're going to do. You can give another a gift by not contaminating their speech with interruptions or your own thoughts. So it's very important for people to work this through by themselves. They don't need somebody else telling them, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, or interrupting their thought as they are processing the work that they need to do. It's a miracle to another to listen and just be present. I'm sure most of you have heard the word holding space. When you're holding space for someone, you're being completely present and you're allowing them to do what it is that they need to do. You don't need to do anything else unless they ask you to, unless they say, what do you think, or whatever. Eventually, the speaker overlaps themselves and the mandorla is created and healing happens. Whenever you have a clash of opposites and neither will give way, you can be sure sacred space is present. You've got two opposites and you've got this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is sacred space in the middle between the two opposites. This has the possibility for making healing happen. So you don't have to, you can agree to disagree, but you have to come together and you have to say, okay, I agree to disagree, but I still love you, or I still honor you, or you're still part of who I am. We're having an issue right now in our world where this is very, very difficult because we've been hurt a lot by inappropriate things that have happened to us, or even ancestral healing or that we need, or even inner child work that needs to be healed. We don't like being in this confrontational mode, and we try to avoid it. We try to avoid it vehemently. But you know when something isn't working. You know when something has shifted and there's a problem. A mandorla is a prototype of conflict resolution at its best. Generally, two opposing views make us a bit neurotic. It takes the poet in us to overlap. Okay, so you got these two, and then you've got here, all right, I'll give this much, all right, I'll give that much, and we got an overlap there in the middle. Poetic language is metaphor, and because it brings ideas in shortened ways, many people fear its use. You take a this and a that and make a mandorla of it. There really is only one circle, and two were and one was Maya, and our need to live in duality. Maya is illusion. We believe we are not that person, but we are that person, and it is important for us to heal that. Our life can be viewed as a mandorla where opposites find reconciliation. a relationship where masculine and feminine and exist in all selves. Remember, whether we have a masculine or feminine partner, all of us have the masculine and feminine inside of us as well. And so we're constantly dealing with integration of those things and appreciation for those things. The Mandorla is a temporary moment as we live in a dualistic world, and enlightenment cannot be a permanent state. We'd like to think it is. We'd like to say, well, I'm enlightened, now I don't have to do anything more. But we know that before enlightenment, we wash the dishes, we chop wood and carry water. And after enlightenment, we do the same thing because we live in a world where we must. It's very important. But that doesn't mean we can't go back and heal many times over for different things. We're works in progress. Return to the shadow and ego is also ongoing work. Because we live in a society, we always have shadow as well that is societally collective. With war, with violence, with racism, we see it over and over. Homophobia, age phobia, youth, slamming youth, whatever. We need to be aware of it and to balance shadow each day in earthly life, especially because of our cultural indoctrination, and by doing so, will diminish the shadow we project onto others. We don't need to add to the collective if we do so, and by preparing a way for integration via a mandorla, we bring more wholeness into our consciousness. I'm going to leave you with just a couple of things here. If you find a person who is particularly peaceful or has a healing presence, it's probably because they have done work with their mandorla. If you want to affect your environment, don't get lost in your activism. Stop for a moment and make a mandorla. Don't just do. Be something. We are human beings, not human doings. If enough people will do their inner work, the soul work is one thing that will pull us through any emergency, and the mandorla is a peacemaking idea. The ancient alchemists understood the process that we must go through between ego and shadow. In alchemy, which is taking something and transmuting it, moving it into another thing, one goes through 4 stages. The nigredo, which one experiences the darkness and the depression of life. We all have that. The albedo, in which one sees the brightness of everything. The rubedo, where one discovers passion. And that doesn't even mean sexual love. It just means finds a passionate thing that they're interested in. And finally, the citrino, where one appreciates the goldenness of life. After this comes a full color mandorla. This is the pavantis, the peacock's tail, and this is when it all spreads out beautifully like a peacock. The mandorla is not the place of neutrality or compromise. It is the place of the peacock tail and rainbows. It has been my pleasure to do this with you and to do this for myself as well. I've found a lot of things about myself that needed healing. I hope you did too. There is an article that I will be putting on that's called Mandorla in Soul Collage. And that was one of the things I wondered if anybody wanted to do. It's making a collage basically out of some of your ideas. And it can be on cards or it could be on a bigger type of a thing. And finally, the mandorla is seen very clearly on different religious icons. It's how Mother Mary is set, or the saints are set on some of the icons that people have in their religious rituals, like the Byzantines and some of the Russian Orthodox as well, and Greek Orthodox religions. All of it very, very primal, but at the same time, very, very appropriate and very important for healing of our ego shadow. Next time you get to that point, don't let it fester. Bring it here, bring it to the shadow, bring it to the mandorla, and try to reconcile it, whether it be with someone else or just yourself. And in the meantime, my blessings to you and my hopes that all of you have been able to get something out of this. Thank you so much.